Hi, this video is about time between Crecy campaign and Poitiers campaign, major difficulties and situation. Stay tuned. In the winter 1347 and 1348, a disease came from Sicily, which was allegedly brought on by the ship that sails either from the Black Sea or from the Middle East. From Marseille, the disease quickly spread throughout Europe. We now call it bubonic plague. Modern medicine doesn't know where it came from exactly, although it is suggested that the disease was brought by the fleas that parasites rats and mice. In the unhygienic Middle Ages, it was almost impossible to prevent the spread of disease, especially in the cities, with crowds of lack of sanitation. The death rate was very high. In August 1448, the plague spread to England, came either from Bordeaux on a ship that brought wine or on a ship that brought property from Calais to Weymouth. And from there the disease moved to Dorset, Somerset and Devon. In London it was first recorded in November. Symptoms were swelling, bubons in the groin and armpits, black spots on the skin, fever. After 4 days it all ended in death. The catastrophe was so terrible that it was impossible to even think about the war. France, weakened by the military defeat and in the absence of a strong central authority, suffered incredibly. The fields fell into desolation. The fodder intended for the war horses went to feed farm animals. The impoverished knights engaged in robbery. The population was shrinking, tax collection decreased, money depreciated. The government and courtiers fled from Paris. Philip wandered along the borders of Normandy with a few officials and servants. Most of the French regarded the plague as a punishment from heaven, however all kinds of sorcerers were also blamed. Tongues were cut off for blasphemy. Jews, of course, were more persecuted than ever. The consequences were not so dire in England, but nevertheless were very serious.
In the kingdoms of Wessex, Sussex, Essex and Kent, plague. In Mercia and the two Anglias, plague with a 50% chance of pestilence and famine coming out of the northeast at 12 miles per hour.
The mortality rate was especially high among priests if they performed their duty as they should, constant contact with the victim of the disease. In the dioceses of York and Lincoln, 44% of the total number of clergy died. In the Exeter, Winchester and Ely, 50% of the priests died. For a long time it was believed that during the first plague epidemic, about a third of population died. By 1350 the plague had reached Scotland. However, the modern historians believe that the number of victims was much higher. Yet in England the calamity was not so dire as in France. The reason for this is more effective central government that controlled the entire country and a popular king, in contrast to the France, where semi-autonomous rulers and unpopular king ruled. The first epidemic struck in England mainly the poor and malnourished people, in contrast to the nobility who lived in the relatively cleaner areas. Their French brothers were less fortunate. The Queen died, as well as Duchess of Normandy and the Council, as well as many representatives of aristocracy. Due to the decline in the rural population, the English peasants were no longer too tightly attached to their owners and couldn't demand the high wages. Westminster did not meet them halfway and declared that the peasants should not receive more than they had before the plague, or those land owners who paid more were fined. The French had a different point of view. The workers there did not agree to work at the old rates. In France, law, order and government went wrong for a while. And in England the authority did not lose the control, despite the growth of crime and economic problems. Neither side was planning a large-scale operation, but the war was still smoldering. In 1349 there was an attempt to bribe the Genoese commander of the mercenaries in Calais. They wanted him to leave the city gates open on the night of December 31st, lower the drawbridge and allow French detachment to recapture the city. The commander took the money, agreed to betrayal, but immediately sent a galley to the King Edward with the message about the bribery. The king rushed to France with his servants and archers and set a trap for the raiders as they approached the gate. The Genoese kept the money for himself. After the death of John Plantagenet, Castile broke alliance with England. The Castilian fleet entered the Channel. The Castilians must have intended to interfere with English trade with Bordeaux or to prevent English food convoys from entering Calais, or maybe both. English intelligence issued a warning, and on August 29, 1350, there was a naval battle in the Winchelsea area. The English fleet, led by the Edward who took with him the sons Prince of Wales and the 10-year-old John of Gaunt, won a great victory over a small flotilla which consisted of a larger and therefore difficult to attack Spanish ships. Edward was 37 years old, and in this battle he last participated in the hand-to-hand combat, although his authority was so great that he could not do it. When, in August 1350, when France was recovering from the plague, Philip VI died. Philip was succeeded by John II, who turned 31 years old. He is known in French history as John the Good. Fans of myths talked about the king's incredible personal courage and his love for torments, ignoring the fact that it was vicious, inconsistent, unfair person, incompetent in military affairs and simply stupid. I will make a separate video about him. He was described as handsome and had a very lovely red beard. John also founded a knightly order, the Order of the Stars. The members of this order took an oath not to leave the battlefield alive, which largely explains why it no longer exists. Particularly angered by the English increased antipathy to the papacy and found a way out in the Reformation, the Pope appointed 12 cardinals for the coronation of John II. 8 of them were French, 3 Spanish, and 1 Italian, that is, not a single English one. John was unable to immediately resume the war, although he began to raise funds for levying large taxes and devaluing the currency. To this end, he minted more money by reducing the silver content in the coins. Despite the Calais peace treaty, skirmishes continued in Aquitaine in Brittany. On July 20, 1350, the great Sir Thomas Dagworth was ambushed in Brittany, and although he fought fiercely, he was eventually killed. The following year, Henry Lancaster made a short and devastating chevauchée across Artois and Picardy. In Brittany, perhaps one of the last knightly duels took place, the Battle of 30. I made a video about it, you can watch it here. A French detachment under the command of Jean de Beaumanoir took off from the Gesline castle and, having galloped 8 miles, found themselves near the walls of Pemel castle. The siege did not take place. The commander of the English garrison, Robert Bembro, agreed for a nightly duel. 30 men on each side were fight each other on foot. They agreed on the rules of a battle and on weapons, agreed on when and where to rest, and Bandage Woods appointed a meeting place at the equal distance from their castles. The duel took place on May 13, 1351. The English lost, but accused the French of breaking the rules. More you can find in my video. Sir Walter Bentley became the Dagworth successor in Brittany, a tough professional warrior from Staffordshire. He came from a family that in the past was often in opposition of the king. Edward III did not show rancor towards the former oppositionists, if they became useful to him and were ready to be loyal. He did not believe the inheritance of the sins of fathers to children, and evidenced by the fact that among his senior commanders were Hugh Despenser and Roger Mortimer, sons of those executed by the order of the king. On August 14, 1352, with a detachment of about 200 horsemen and 300 archers, Bentley defeated a larger French army at Mauron, halfway between Rennes and Ploermel. In accordance with English tactical doctrine, Bentley stationed his men on the slope, dismounted horsemen in the center, archers on the flank. After Crecy, the French learned a thing or two. Their commander Guy de Nil ordered most of his men to dismount, and several hundred horsemen to go down the English archers. If the attack was well coordinated, such a tactic could work. The French horsemen managed to scatter the English archers, but instead of turning around and attacking the English from the rear, they began to plunder the Bentley's convoy. On the left flank, the English repelled the cavalry attack, but were unable as usual to unleash the shower of arrows on the approaching French infantry. Climbing a steep slope, tired of heat and the weight of their armor, the French were not ready for melee combat, and the English soldiers threw them off the hill. The chronicles, as always, either overestimated or underestimated the losses. According to Geoffrey Le Baker, the French lost 10 lords, 640 knights, 500 squires, and the common people without number, in addition the 140 knights captured. The real picture is probably about 200 French, many of them are Knights of the Stars. As for the prisoners, the data seems to be correct. Not a single source mentions the English losses. Le Baker testifies that Bentley ordered the execution on the spot of 12 archers who fled at the moment of the attack of the French cavalry, but this seems completely incredible. However, it is possible that for education of others he executed one of the militia commanders. although the English economy recovered from the plague faster than the French one, wages rose, but prices rose too, and the owners received almost the same income. Edward was glad the possibility of negotiations, not forgetting to prepare for the renewal of the war. Since the capture of Calais, the parties tried to agree on something, but nothing worked, because Philip VI refused to recognize the conquered territories as English, considering them as the possession of Valois, and the English considered such a statement unacceptable. By 1353, the situation had changed, not only because John was succeeded Philip, but also because Pope Clement VI died, and was replaced by Innocent VI. Innocent was even more pro-French than his predecessor, but he understood the need of the end of war in the plague-weakened Europe. Negotiations began at Guînes Castle, 5 miles south of Calais, but were interrupted by a surprise attack by a detachment under the command of the archer John Dancaster. Weary from the garrison service in Calais, John gathered several soldiers, and at night they all jumped over the walls and captured the castle of Guînes. The castle of Guînes, 6 miles south of English-held Calais, was a crucial link in the French defenses, controlling both the main waterway and the road into Calais. It also was the main detention center for English prisoners of war. John Dancaster, an English soldier of fortune, spent time at Guînes as a prisoner of war. While working as a part of a labor gang, Dancaster noticed a submerged wall that spanned the moat, likely designed for sorties by the castle garrison. Upon release from Guînes, Dancaster recruited a group of men and returned to the castle at night. Wearing blackened armor, the men crossed the moat atop the submerged wall and placed scaling ladders against the walls. Safely over, the English killed the sentries, tossed their body off the wall, freed the prisoners, and took control of the castle. Unable to dislodge Dancaster, the French sent emissaries to London asking Edward III to order the raiding party out of Guînes. The English king denied any knowledge of Dancaster's assault, but supplied a letter to a French charging any subject of his to return the castle to its rightful owner. Unfortunate timing afflicted the French cause. January 17 marked the opening session of the English Parliament. Bellicose speech against the French were the norm, and Edward III and his ministers decided to break the truce and keep Guînes. At month's end, English troops arrived to take possession of the castle. The French, incensed by Edward's change of heart, reacted by having the guard commanding at night of Dancaster's assault drawn and quartered on the probably false charge of taking a bribe. The English, meanwhile, were feting Dancaster as a national hero. In May 1352, the French laid siege to Guînes, but the roughly 115 English defenders humiliated the 4,500-strong attacking forces. By July, the French had given up. When Dancaster's escalade had taken the English a crucial fortress they would hold for more than 200 years. So Cardinal Guy of Boulogne was running between Avignon, Paris and Guînes, and as a result in April 1354 a treaty draft was proposed in Guînes, according to which Edward, in exchange for renouncing his claim to the French throne, was receiving Aquitaine, Normandy, Turin on the terms of sovereignty, Poitou and Calais suburbs. Such an agreement would end the war, give the English what was rightly theirs, and at the same time allow John to retain part of his kingdom and not lose it at all. The Pope was to ratify the treaty in Avignon, but that did not happen. John changed his mind, since his nobles objected to the treaty, and Guy of Boulogne also lost confidence of the king. King Edward was angry at the failure of negotiations, especially because he had already assured the parliament both of the success of a peace agreement and that there would be no more tax increases on military spending. It was necessary to teach French king a lesson and to make him realize that this time there would be no compromise. In 1455 a plan was made to attack the French from 3 sides. The king himself would strike from the Guînes, from Calais. Henry Lancaster, now the Earl, would strike from Normandy, and the Black Prince would operate from Aquitaine. There were problems with the weather and with finding enough soldiers. Nevertheless, in October 1355 Edward landed at Calais with an army of about 8,000 men and moved toward Amiens, where John Valois gathered a larger army. But then bad news came from England. The Scottish attacked again. On November the 6th they invaded England and laid siege to the Berwick castle. The troublemakers got used to acting without the participation of the king, that it was still in the English prison. The Scots declared that they were bound by a treaty with an ally and must attack English in the event of the invasion of France. The last time they did this was in 1346, but then there were enough troops in the north of England. However, now in 1355, 3 English armies entered the France, and the plague greatly reduced the population, which forced Edward to draft the northerners into the army, so that there were few defenders on the border with Scotland. The king had no choice. He had to return to Calais and from there go home. Lancaster's army never arrived in Brittany. Bad weather and untimely winds, which carried the fleet back to England shores, prevented this. Only the Black Prince army manages to cross the Channel. In September 1355, Prince Edward landed in Bordeaux with an army of about 1,000 horsemen, 1,700 archers and several hundred Welsh spearmen. The 25-year-old man had already proven his personal courage under the Crecy, but he never commanded an entire army. His father, however, left him a help, experienced and intelligent officers. The Earl of Warwick, Suffolk and Salisbury took part in the Scottish wars, the Battle of Crecy and the Siege of Calais. They were ready to give advice and warn the young men against reckless adventurers. In the year of 1355 was disappointing in some respects. The expected peace did not come, the attacks from the three fronts did not work, and the Scots again invaded England. The last threat was soon dealt with. Chevauchée of Black Prince did not lead to major battles and once again demonstrated the inability of a French king to protect his subjects. This encouraged the Gascons and reduced the taxes that could be levied on plundering land. The English captured a huge amount of valuable goods, clothing, wine, not to mention horses and prisoners for which they could take a ransom. Edward's soldiers were pleased and wanted to repeat the success next year. This was justified because 1356 brought great victories to the English in the 100 Years' War. Well, that's it for it today. Thank you very much. Like it if you do, subscribe if you don't want to miss more. Thank you very much. Bye bye.